This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Sudan adjourns a trial against former leader Bashir and allies on trial for a 1989 coup. The African Union holds a virtual summit between Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt as it seeks to resolve a standoff over the Blue Nile Dam. And South Asia floods kill hundreds in India, Bangladesh and Nepal. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Hannah Viviers with the day's business headlines.
Thank
Hannah.
you so much, Beatrice. Well, here's what's coming up in a business. Tanzania seeks investors for prime flour firms in Arusha, north of the country. And the central bank in Nigeria leaves interest rates unchanged as inflation fears mount. I'll be back with more details on that story, but for now, here's news making headlines with Beatrice Marshall.
Hannah, thank you. And let's start off with the trial of Sudan's former President Omar al-Bashir over the 1989 coup that brought him to power. It has begun in Khartoum. He's being charged alongside his former allies. Al-Bashir ruled Sudan for 30 years before being deposed by the military in April of last year. His ouster followed widespread protests. A local court has already handed Bashir a 2-year sentence for corruption. In his current charge, a Khartoum court adjourned the hearing to August the 11th to allow creation of more space in the courtroom for more lawyers and family members of the accused.
This court is ready to receive any demands, objections or anything. This court will stand on neutral grounds vis-à-vis all sides of this case. We will adjourn these trial proceedings to take better measures, to have a bigger hall to include all lawyers.
The United Nations has started relocating hundreds of South Sudanese in northern Uganda after ethnic clashes broke out in a refugee settlement. 3 people have died and over 700 others were displaced following the fighting. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
Tensions remain high at Palorinya refugee settlement in northern Uganda. The Uganda police and the army have been deployed to restore calm. The recent violence among refugees erupted over theft of crops. The UN Refugee Agency is now offering a safe haven for refugees affected by intercommunal violence and is trying to promote reconciliation through refugee community leaders. They blame the spike in violence on the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected the livelihoods of many refugee families.
People have lost whatever little opportunities, livelihood opportunities they had. They have lost or already utilized whatever saving they might had. Now they don't have any jobs to support their families, their gardens, and this hunger or, access to food, feeding their families. This is another contributing factor that has, led to the theft of the food, which actually triggered these clashes.
Uganda is home to over 1.4 million refugees. South Sudanese refugees account for 65% of that figure. The UN Refugee Agency is now appealing for more resources so that they can support the refugees.
UNHCR needs $28 million immediately to continue the current level of its operation. And if we don't receive that anytime soon, we might be forced to scale down the current level of operation.
And with this kind of support, they hope to ease tensions in refugee communities. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Heavy monsoon rains continue to hit South Asia. Floods and landslides have killed over 100 people in India. In the country's east, at least 9 rivers have risen beyond their danger levels, inundating many villages. More flooding has been warned for Bangladesh and Nepal in the coming days. Bangladeshi officials say nearly 70 people have died and that 1/3 of the country is now underwater. At least 2.6 million people have been affected. In Nepal, 79 people have died while 46 are missing after floods and landslides. While Chinese authorities have issued its highest warning, a red alert, as flood risks grow along the Huaihe River. The water level at the Wangjiaba hydrological station on the main course of the river rose more than 29 meters on Monday morning, exceeding the guaranteed level of safety. In response, the Wangjiaba Dam opened all of its floodgates for the first time in 13 years to release excess water to the Menjua flood diversion area. Wang Yushen report explains the importance of the move.
It's 8:30 a.m. Monday. A rush of water is unleashed as all 13 sluice gates are opened at the major Wangjiaba Dam on the Huaihe River, the waterway forming the divide between northern and southern China. Here in Guimiao, a village in Fuyang City, Anhui Province, local people are busy moving their property as fast as they can.
Business is not good this year due to the pandemic, and if I don't move my stock to a safer place, I will suffer huge losses.
Most of the villagers here are shop owners and farmers who have homes in the safe zones but continue to work and do business here. With help from local government, the evacuation of their business is moving ahead.
All your stuff here needs to be moved out, because once the water comes, your house will be completely submerged. Don't worry, we have plenty of people helping you.
This village is located in the Menghua flood storage area, the first flood storage and detention area in the middle reaches of the Huaihe River. And this is where the waters from the Wangjiaba Dam will be discharged. This basin can hold nearly 750 million cubic meters of water, so it's expected to be a big help in reducing the flood pressure on the embankments on both sides of the Huaihe River. Located at the beginning of the river's middle reaches, the Wangjiaba Dam is a critical spot in terms of flood prevention. The Huaihe River flows for around 1,000 kilometers with a total drop in elevation of 200 meters. But nearly 90% of the drop occurs in its long upper reaches over a distance of 360 kilometers. This means huge pressure and excessive volumes of water at the Wangjiaba Dam. The flat and long middle lower reaches contribute to the difficulty of the flood control. In its middle reaches of 490 kilometers, mostly in Anhui Province, the drop is just 16 meters, making it difficult for floods to recede. This means areas along the river such as Henan, Jiangsu, and Shandong provinces could all face risks of flood if the water is not handled properly. And it's not a straightforward process.
Next, we need to strictly monitor and safeguard the major dikes of the Yangtze River, Huaihe River, and Chao Lake to ensure that they do not burst. Secondly, strengthen the overall planning and control, abandon small and medium-sized dikes if necessary. Third, we should resolutely and promptly organize the evacuation of residents away from the flood discharge and storage areas and other high-risk zones so as to ensure the safety of people's lives and property.
24 hours after the Wangjiaba Dam was opened, the water level has dropped by around 24 centimeters. This is due to major water flows continue to come down from upstream, causing a fluctuation of water levels. So experts will be anxiously monitoring the situation in the hours to come. Wang Yushen, CGTN.
Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan have participated in a virtual mini-summit on Tuesday that was organized by the African Union to discuss the escalating row over Ethiopia's giant hydro dam on the Nile. The talks were chaired by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Previous rounds of negotiations amongst the three countries have failed to end the row. The standoff involving Ethiopia on the one side and Egypt and Sudan on the other was highlighted after allegations that Ethiopia had started filling the controversial dam with water from the Blue Nile. Egypt and Sudan have raised concern over a possible reduction of their share of the waters of the Nile. Well, earlier we spoke to CGTN's Adel Makhroui in Cairo and Girum Chala in Addis Ababa on their countries' respective expectations.
The African Union-led mini-summit follows 11 days of ministerial negotiations between Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia, which have ended without an agreement. Egypt has followed the AU's recommendation to file reports on the outcomes of these meetings to the heads of states, so that the AU can find common ground between the leaders. Egypt wants to finalize all hanging issues in a legally binding agreement before Ethiopia begins filing the dam's reservoir. Cairo has extended its hand of friendship to Addis Ababa, vowing to support all required development projects. All what Egypt wants in return is a guarantee that its water share from the Nile won't be adversely affected. Egypt wants the three nations to focus on a future where their people are not harmed. This could be the country's last pursuit for an African-led solution. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry has not yet announced its next steps, but it says all political solutions are on the table, including going back to the UN Security Council. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Ras Sidr, Egypt.
The latest round of negotiations and what is the second attempt by the African Union is hoped to resolve the major contentious issues around the GERD talks. And alongside Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan, South Africa as chair and DR Congo, Kenya and Mali as members will take part. Ethiopia's expectation out of this mini-summit on its Grand Dam seems to be clear. And authorities said an agreement can be reached if and only if a mutually beneficial cooperation between the three nations is reached on the Nile waters. And the second, Ethiopia wants no treaty that would jeopardize the would-be benefits of its people from the Blue Nile waters. And so any article in this context won't be acceptable. On the other hand, we have heard from officials here that deal or no deal, the construction of the multi-billion-dollar dam will continue with no single halt. Ethiopia says it needs the GERD to go operational soon, so it can not only provide electricity to its 50 million people, but also lift its 110 million people out of the bonds of poverty. Group Tala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Chinese President Xi Jinping says market protection is key to economic development in China as it deals with the impact brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. He made the remark during a forum with Chinese entrepreneurs in Beijing.
I want to use this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to various enterprises, whether state-owned, private or foreign, including those from Macau, Hong Kong and Taiwan. I would like to thank them for their contributions during the coronavirus pandemic and their efforts to prevention and control.
President Xi pointed out the need to promote entrepreneurship. He said China will implement more targeted policies to benefit and support businesses as it aims to create a favorable legal and international environment for commerce. President Xi called on government officials to conduct more exchanges with entrepreneurs in order to develop better policies. President Xi also said China must make good use of the strength of the country's market, push forward technological innovation, and continue to reform and open up in the face of rising protectionism and a volatile global economy. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has announced his intention to contest in the country's next presidential election in 2021. President Museveni will be seeking a sixth term in office after 34 years in power. CGTN's Michael Baleke has that report.
President Museveni is seeking to run for office on a ticket from the ruling National Resistance Movement NRM party. The ruling party's electoral commission says he's so far the only person who has shown interest in the top position.
Candidate Yoweri Museveni is the only one who has picked forms and paid the 10 million required.
President Museveni has been in power since 1986 after a 5-year guerrilla war that ousted 2 presidents. While Mr. Museveni has been praised for bringing peace and stability to Africa's troubled region, his critics in Uganda argue that it's time he handed over power.
Success in leadership is determined by the ability to nurture and groom successors. So what is evident is that there is no succession in NRM. President Museveni has no interest or did not have any interest in grooming successors. And him picking forms yesterday is not surprising because this was evident through lifting of age limit that was aimed at benefiting only him as an individual.
In July 2018, the Constitutional Court in Uganda endorsed the Parliament's decision to scrap the cap on the presidential age of 75 years. However, this did not go down well, with politicians opposed to his government, claiming the court ruling handed Museveni a life presidency. Michael Balekesi, GTN, Kampala, Uganda.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Egyptian authorities in the process of producing a locally made drug to treat COVID-19. And Kenya reviews plans to reopen technical training institutions.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
My family has been doing this artwork for the past 600 years.
My dream is to be the leading player in Africa in spice sector.
Nobody in the region consumes it. Even me cannot afford the vanilla cooking.
What we've created here is the elegance, the color, the celebration of life.
Well, let's take a look at the latest on the coronavirus situation on the continent. And Africa has recorded more than 736,200 coronavirus cases. The continent has lost over 15,400 people. Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe and Botswana are some of the African nations that have registered an increase in the viral infections. Kenyan devolved governments have been calling on the national government to implement lockdowns to curb the spread. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says the rise in coronavirus cases in South Africa should be a warning to the world to strengthen surveillance. South Africa now has the 5th highest number of coronavirus cases globally. Egyptian officials have announced that they are in the process of producing the first locally made drug to help treat COVID-19 patients. The development, if confirmed, will be a major breakthrough for the North African country's efforts to counter the coronavirus pandemic. Here's CGTN's Yasa Hakim.
The news came as a pleasant surprise for many Egyptians who were unaware of the ongoing experiments. Hussam Hosni, the head of the Ministry of Health's Scientific Committee to combat COVID-19, is the one who made the announcement. However, he refused to give any details until all clinical tests are finalized. But some experts say this could be a breakthrough in fighting the coronavirus.
Egypt, like many countries, is trying to create its own drug. Work on the Egyptian drug began in June and it has reached an advanced level in July. It is still undergoing clinical tests, but according to the Ministry of Health, the initial results are positive.
The reactions from locals concerning the latest development have been largely positive.
For Egypt to be able to produce a completely Egyptian drug is extremely impressive, and it is a reflection of the high-quality researchers that we have here. This will serve as the fight against coronavirus and also have its economic benefits.
If Egypt really succeeds in producing a local drug, then it will be something we can all be proud of.
Egypt is the only country in the region that manufactures all the drugs it uses in local facilities. The latest is the American-made remdesivir drug that's used in treating extreme coronavirus cases.
Egypt's Eva Pharmacy company has been given the license by the American Gillette company to produce remdesivir in Egypt. They've already started producing it and it is distributed to the hospitals, not to the public or pharmacies because it has to be under medical supervision. Remdesivir is known to cure cases in only 11 days, not the normal 15 or more.
Remdesivir will be distributed to 127 countries from Egypt. Meanwhile, according to Hussam Hosni from the Ministry of Health, the new Egyptian drug is expected to be ready for use in a month's time. Hosni says he's optimistic that once the Egyptian drug is in the market, it will help eradicate the coronavirus pandemic from the North African country. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The COVID-19 pandemic has led to the closure of many technical and vocational education institutions across the world. This has affected efforts to train many young people. In post-COVID-19 societies, the youth will need to be equipped with key technical skills as countries seek to revive different sectors of their economies. CGTN's Wilkisa Nyabwa reports on how Kenya plans to reopen these institutions and safeguard the future of its youth.
The Nairobi Technical Training Institute may have temporarily closed its doors to students, but it is still bustling with activity. In the absence of students, workmen have taken over, sprucing up the Vocational Learning Center against the backdrop of a pandemic. When Kenya registered its first case of COVID-19 in March, the government instructed all institutions of learning, including this one, to send their students home to ensure their safety. It was a huge setback for learners here.
For us, we don't have content that is digitized. Meaning what? Immediately we closed, learning stopped. Although after some time, like Nairobi TTI, we called our staff, we had virtual meetings, and agreed that we start online training in whatever form.
The closure also dealt a blow to the ambitious plans the government had laid out for young people in these technical training institutes. In Kenya, TVETs refer to technical and vocational education and training institutions, centers spread out across the country where, with government sponsorship, young people learn technical skills through which they can earn a living. These skills include carpentry, dressmaking, engineering, teaching, and other skills.
We realized through global research reports that no government can provide more than 25% of employment of its citizens. Governments are not essentially supposed to employ. They are supposed to facilitate employment. That is self-employment, private employment, and any other kind of engagement that people can find. So the president realized that the nexus between his promise and realization thereof was killing young people.
In Kenya in 2019, 680,000 students sat their end of secondary school exams. Only 122,000 gained admission to university. The rest were left out. Now the government is targeting at least 500,000 students to join these institutions by the end of the year.
This training has been very useful to me, and I hope that many others get this opportunity too. I wish the government would add more equipment so that more students could enroll.
In order to reach these students, even in the pandemic, some technical institutions, even in rural areas, have gone online. But they can't reach everyone in this way. So come September, should they meet the health requirements, learning will resume at these centers.
So we are looking at a situation where we are going even to put them in tents for theory classes. Then in the workshops, what we are going to do is that to reduce the numbers that go in the workshop.
In the time being, workers are not only renovating the classrooms, they're preparing for the new socially distanced learning process. And when the students come, they will take their places to prepare for the future.
For those with skills, as we reconstruct the economy after the pandemic, there will be young people who took advantage of this message, enrolled, got trained, and salvaged their lives.
For the hundreds of thousands of young Kenyans who join the job market every year, having a skill can make a great difference. And this is why, once the requirements are met, come September, thousands of young people will be joining institutions such as this in order to start their careers. Wilkisanyabwa, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
Senegal's capital, Dakar, is well known for its scenic views of the Atlantic Ocean. But ocean erosion is threatening the country's coastline. Rising sea levels and budding construction projects are putting pressure on the coast. CGTN's Ashta Tal has more on how activists are trying to fight against ocean erosion.
Along Dakar's coast, construction projects have popped up, all looking to cash in on the scenic view. But Senegal's coastline is under threat. A World Bank post in 2015 highlighted that 25% of the country's coast was at high risk for erosion. While rising sea levels are partially to blame, so are aggravated human activities like construction.
Today, the fact that this strip is being destroyed means that we are telling the ocean to enter because our coast is open to maritime trade winds and upwelling currents from North Atlantic. And today, we are telling the ocean to enter the land and salt the ground. What will happen is that the salted water will wear the foundations of buildings kilometers inland. It's going to erode the steel and weaken the buildings, which could be catastrophic to the human beings.
But Dakar's population of 3 million inhabitants continues to grow, and with that growth comes the need for living spaces. To make room for new buildings, plantations of filau trees have been cut down.
The trees are being cut down to help purify the air, help to balance the ecosystem, and help to provide us with a healthy environment.
Guédiawaye is a neighborhood filled with mostly working-class Senegalese. A highway separates filau trees from construction projects. Here, a group of young activists have come together to plant trees in an effort to replace those cut down by construction projects.
We want to give an example to all the youth associations in Senegal to say that with community actions and with the youth being involved, we truly can reforest the coast. Because for me, the coast is a common good. Everyone should have access to it. Therefore, everyone should be involved in its preservation.
Jibril plans on nurturing the trees for 2 years until they grow, and his group plans to plant more trees after that. His group is, among others, made up of young Senegalese, environmentalists, and other experts, all trying to stop Senegal's coastal erosion. Ashta Tal, CGTN.
A Tunisian woman has gained respect in the country's artistic circles thanks to her mastery of painting on water. The artist works with her daughter at home and creates unique paintings that many Tunisians and foreign art collectors are buying online. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi tells us more.
Zohra Zarrouqi studied fine arts in Tunisia before traveling to Istanbul, Turkey, to pursue a master's degree in Hebrew arts at the prestigious Research Center for History, Art and Culture. The painter believes in the cultural role that China's ancient Silk Road project played in bringing to light Hebrew, which is the art of painting on water.
This art is over 1,000 years old. It originated in China and was then transmitted thanks to China's Silk Road to Iran and the Ottoman Empire. Now I'm working on spreading the word and sharing the passion for Hebrew art in North Africa by organizing several workshops per year.
The Tunisian painter spent several hours per day at her gallery. This is where she dreams and plans to sell her paintings across the whole world.
I've sold my paintings in more than 15 countries after taking part in international exhibitions. We do not have an art market here in Tunisia. That's why I plan to create the first Tunisian fine arts company to distribute local Hebrew works globally.
Hadil is Zohra's daughter and friend. The 13-year-old poet, artist and writer grew up in an artistic environment. She learned at an early age how to create beautiful, colorful patterns by sprinkling and brushing color pigments on a pan of oily water and then transforming this pattern to a special paper.
I like painting on water. My inspiration comes from natural landscapes and everyday life scenes. I encourage children to learn this art.
The two Tunisian painters will organize an international exhibition and several online workshops to share their passion for painting on water.
The coronavirus crisis and the long lockdown was an opportunity for Zohra and her daughter Havil to further develop their Hebrew painting techniques. This is how they have become famous on social media for creating colorful and joyful paintings. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, let's now go to Hannah Vivier for the latest business news. Hannah.
Thank you, Beatrice. Well, here's what's coming up in the business news. Tanzania seeks investors for prime flower firms in Arusha, north of the country. And the central bank in Nigeria leaves interest rates unchanged as inflation fears mount.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. It's time for your business news. The Tanzanian government is seeking new investors for 8 premium horticultural farms in Arusha that had been repossessed. According to Deputy Agriculture Minister Hussein Bashe, the farms located on the southern slopes of Mount Meru were once pioneer producers of barley, wheat, flowers, and vegetables. However, they have been lying idle after being abandoned for over a decade. The farm owners are said to have fled the country after defaulting on government-insured loans amounting to a little over $19 million. The owners, local and foreign investors, borrowed the funds through the Bank of Tanzania's credit guarantee scheme between 2005 and 2007. Meanwhile, after a drought and cyclone in 2019, this year was supposed to be all about recovery in Zimbabwe. However, efforts to bounce back economically have been thwarted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The country's finance minister has revised growth figures in his midterm budget review and expects the economy to shrink by 4.5%.
There will be contraction across all major sectors, including mining, which will shrink by 4.1%, manufacturing 10.8%, and tourism 7.4%. Government's response is to maintain fiscal discipline.
When you look at the macroeconomic thrust and framework, it hasn't really changed. I think we are still steeped in austerity. Because when you also look at our COVID-19 health expenditure for the first half of the year, I think we're not doing as well as we should. So I think it's going to be very, very difficult. And the government doesn't actually have the degrees of freedom probably to upscale social expenditures. But I think that's a major challenge now.
Despite the impact of COVID-19 as well as rampant inflation, Professor Mthuli Ncube says he won't require a supplementary budget, which could mean no big wage increase for public servants. They're up in arms after demands for higher pay.
We honestly expected them to loosen things and loosen the bolts and make it a point that they address the demands of the workers. Because as far as we are concerned, workers are at their poorest, their weakest and the lowest ebb since independence.
Government workers say their earnings have been eroded by inflation, which eased marginally to 737% in June. The finance minister is optimistic the retreat will continue to 300% by year end.
He believes that now with the new auction system that's coming in, it's going to stabilize the exchange rate, which will obviously reduce the pressure on prices. And he said that a lot of retailers and business were forward pricing, in other words, anticipating where the exchange rate would grow and therefore pricing their products accordingly. He said that will disappear with the auction as more and more players can access foreign currency in the auction system.
Increased output of traditional grains is also anticipated to subdue food inflation. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Nigeria's central bank has retained its monetary policy rates at 12.5% as the country battles revenue shortages. The governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria had announced a decision at the end of the Apex Bank's Monetary Policy Committee meeting. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmos with more on that story.
With Nigeria facing rising inflation and reduced accretion to its reserves as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and fall in oil price, everyone was waiting to see how the Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee was going to respond. After reviewing the economic situation in the country and across the world, the central bank governor announced the decision of the committee.
The MPC voted 1, to retain the MPR at 12.5%, 2, to retain the asymmetric corridor of plus 200 and minus 500 basis points around the MPR, 3, retain the CRR at 27.5%, and 4, retain the liquidity ratio at 30%.
The decision did not come as a surprise to many, given that the Monetary Policy Committee only adjusted the benchmark lending rate downwards in May after holding it for over a year. The central bank governor says retaining the rates was the best option under the circumstance.
The earlier downward adjustment of the monetary policy rate by 100 basis points to 12.5% to signal the loosening monetary policy stance is yielding positive impact as credit growth increased significantly in the economy. The committee also noted the positive impact of the various fiscal and monetary interventions on the household and SMEs and manufacturing sector. The committee also noted that increasing NPR at this stage will thus be counterintuitive and will result in upward pressure on market rates and cost of production.
With the country's headline inflation at a high of 12.56%, analysts say the decision is very unlikely to impact inflation.
I think Nigerians should prepare to see further increase in inflation and look at the issues that will drive inflation. You still have supply chain disruptions or bottlenecks that are leading to increase in the cost of goods and services. We've not gotten to the harvest season. The harvest season will come obviously maybe from August. So the July inflation should see a further uptick. And then there is the government trying to push for a market reflective price for petrol. If price of petrol continues to increase, it will have transmission effect will still directly hit the consumer price index.
Now, apart from inflation, Nigeria is also battling a severe forex shortage at the moment, which is seriously affecting importers. The CBN governor says the situation would gradually improve following the recent devaluation of the country's currency. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Let's move over to Ethiopia now, where poultry farmers have been forced to slaughter hundreds of thousands of chicks as the sector reels from a collapse in demand for chicken from the hotel sector because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Alexandra Majala has the details.
Workers at a chicken farm on the outskirts of Addis Ababa, which is also the biggest supplier of poultry products in Ethiopia's capital, face a grim task. Between May and June 2020, they culled thousands of young chicks, most of them just a day old.
Totally, I think we destroyed around 650,000 chickens culled in those 5 weeks, and we have to actually pull some eggs from our hatchery so that we can actually destroy them as eggs instead of chickens.
The sector is reeling from a collapse in demand from the local hotel sector because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Ethiopia's movement restrictions to try to contain the novel virus, which causes COVID-19, has led hotels in Addis Ababa to reduce operations or close, removing a major source of demand for poultry products.
Most of our suppliers are not working now. They are highly affected. For example, when you see as a dairy product suppliers, meat product suppliers, and vegetable, and everything. Every sector is affected. So just if you are not working, just they can't move. Okay. Not only that, just the import and export activities are not properly functioning. Even it will be difficult for us to pay for our employees. If we are not paying, if we are not working, just it's difficult for us to pay for our employees.
The impact is extremely disrupting for the sector and has potentially devastating social consequences in a country where nearly 15 million people could need government help because of the pandemic.
This sector used to employ a vast group of society in different regions of the country, whether it is the youth or women across all age groups. Now, because we are not receiving day-old chicks as the supply chain is totally disrupted, the people employed in the sector are not working at all. I just cannot give you the number of people employed in this sector, but it is vast. Now, all these people don't have anything to do. This is not something you can simply dismiss.
The hotel sector has been largely paralyzed and unable to pay staff. According to the latest official data, the country has confirmed nearly 10,000 coronavirus cases and over 160 deaths. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Well, coming ahead on Global Business, the South African Airways rescue plan has hit a new hitch after the government refused to commit to another bailout for the state carrier. We'll be bringing you the latest on that story at the top of the hour. But for now, here's more news with Beatrice.
Hannah, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. In our continuing series on tribes in a flux, we'll look at the use of art to earn a living among the San community of Botswana.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
Animals, free movement and empty homes. Jan and Ntrisa Sase paint about this to depict how life used to be for the San before some aspects of their living were declared illegal in Botswana. In part 2 of the San series on CGTN's Africa's Tribes in a Flux, we look at the use of art to cope and earn a living.
tui khangasate masea asa ku khastim qoiba uwa masea khasku khasti thabu twan tamba yanu khai tuiska khai kasi thabu iska tantiti ai lo daran ku hana or nyame ngatata gama kai dara kuwa kana ai ngo au te au dara ya butuka khai iska hanam khabar amaka ko kar khorman tisku tu ata wait ata to khaya kerti ku kuma bo
ha tira tum tama khora ko ni kana kai tuan kana kai khas ku skole kana khabe ko do ha ku ka tse ku tuan ha ka men ka mar tum tama ra ko ni gasa ko ni gasa bor ku tu ni ra
Kia ora, sairi mkorko. Are khaka se tamara, yano khwa qautini khone ana khwa kwa khwan ka kuine. Yano tire ku tirse artist ko khwa ngerika. Adom kor drawing kor ku ai or ngi khoyane ka ya to ku tam khoyesa. Ngerika. Huan ko zar ko sino, nor ko si khoji kuru qong tam kor ko sin ai khor tutsa khuskar ko kuisa. Ara kaba ngiska ti khoyan zar ku ngaino. Si khazi khoji ngi kuru ko ar ko sin ai khor tutsa khuskar ko kuisa.
almost being arco ar corpo nella tris como sama checo totasa noi kaku ta kweta di kan ni nga kana ni kisa setika nga kana ni khu kha u tamane khaner kha ku wi sa aname to ta kisa sera kurs kaisa kamer kha ku ni ku hanata kweta di ain kosa kana is ain kosa ar ama khore ngani khoni twa khabu ana omar korku khoi waran khasus sar kubuti khasus khai kauta sasi hormeta chawata bui na kiata ngari mata ka khoi ka khuse ka khoanya ka hata discuss hadung kai ko kan pinga iku kan chauna de ka drama se wes ko ka kamba kurmase hormem kham ka khoi ka se asus ka kursa sasi
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Uncertainty surrounds the delayed Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games almost a year to rescheduled start.